What's going on YouTube? Bacon here bringing you another video. This one going to be my week 1 battle for the OLT Season 5 Harmony Division. This week we are taking on Cena, coach of the Boston Blazikens, in our first OLT matchup. Sorry again for the delay on getting these out to you. I know I am a couple weeks behind on OLT, and I am currently 1 week behind on VPL in terms of uploads at least. So hopefully I can get back on track this week, do a little bit of kind of bulk recording at the early half of this week and get these out to you guys later. I'll probably start with this upload on Tuesday, April 2nd, it would be my guess, and then try and get maybe one per day to finish off the week kind of thing. I'll do the best I can as far as that's concerned. It's kind of like, if I'm interested in recording, I'll record, and if not, I'll just do something else for the night. So today I'm recording, and hopefully I can get 1 or 2 videos done to get out for you guys later in the week. But yeah, like I mentioned, we were taking on Cena this week, and looking at the team matchup, it's kind of scary for me. He's got Mega Lopunny, Latios, Heatran, Florges, Shaman, Swampert, Raikou, Aerodactyl, Cryogonal, Golisopod, and Honchkrow. So a couple things off the bat. Swampert's a huge problem for my team to deal with unless I bring Celebi, and I really didn't feel like Celebi had a very good matchup in this game, so I elected not to bring the Celebi, unfortunately, as he does bring the Swampert. So that thing's going to be a huge problem for me to deal with. I really do not have great responses to it on my team in general. I just didn't prep as well for the Swampert as I would have liked, and you'll see a little bit of that in the match. A couple other things. Heatran, I felt like I kind of had to bring the Rotom Heat for, because I really didn't have any other good switch-ins on my team, especially if he's running like offensive Heatran, or if he's running at least like Will-O-Wisp on it that hit my Dragonite. So the Heatran was an obvious bring on his end to help deal with my Scizor, help deal with my Diancie to some extent, start to pressure out things like my Celebi. So I felt like it was definitely coming, and I had to bring the Rotom Heat to help counter it. I kind of expected to be a Stealth Rocker this week, so I do have Defog on my Rotom Heat to help deal with that. But that's a huge problem for me. Physically defensive Florges is also pretty scary. I felt like he might bring that for my Dragonite. Also helps to deal with my Crocodile as well. I could be carrying HP Fire for my Scizor. A lot of stuff I need to watch out for. Florges kind of walled me out in prep to some extent, so I'm definitely going to need to be mindful of that. And then last couple things here. The Aerodactyl is a huge threat, outspeeds my entire team, and just Edgequake Stab is really good against, or not Stab, Edgequake coverage is really good versus me in general, so I don't have great switch into that thing this match either. And then Raikou as well. Like, Rotom Heat can switch in on it, but I don't do a ton back. Like, if I overheat and he's Substitute, eventually I won't be breaking his Substitute. It's just, would be a huge problem, potentially, if he's carrying Substitute on his Raikou this week. So yeah, that's a bit into the matchup here. Let me get right into my team builder. Leading off, like I mentioned, with the Rotom Heat. Hot Pockets here coming with Iapapa Berry, Volt Switch, Overheat, Defog, Toxic, Max HP, Max Spadef. Pretty standard defensive type Rotom Heat here. Defog, like I mentioned, is because I anticipate his Stealth Rocker to be the Heatran. And the nice thing about running a no speed is if he's running any speed on his Heatran, well, some speed on his Heatran, odds are I should be able to get slow Volt Switches off on that thing, so I don't have to worry about the rest of my team switching into moves from the Heatran. I can just kind of pressure it out with my Crocodile, pressure it out with my Diancie. Obviously, I should be carrying Earth Power this matchup as I am. Felt like running a slower version of Rotom Heat this game was much better. It'll allow my Berry to proc and get a slow Volt Switch out into one of my offensive threats and start to kind of deal with his team that way. Toxic is there mostly for the Swampert, Latios, and Florges. Originally I had HP Grass on here, but I found that the Florges was kind of a huge problem in prep, so I elected to run Toxic over HP Grass. A little bit regretting that, considering I see the Swampert instead of the Florges. But what are you going to do? Toxic still at least is generally good to help deal with the Swampert, whittle that thing down over the course of the match. And Latios is also kind of a free switch into Rotom Heat. My Dual Stab obviously is resisted by it, and once he figures out I'm a more defensive variant, he shouldn't really fear too much bringing his Latios in on that. So I felt like Toxic was just nice to spread chip around his team, start to whittle him down a little bit for some of my late game mons. Next up here is Grace the Mega Diancie, running kind of a physically offensive Mega Diancie this week. I'm running actually max physical attack with a hasty nature, Moonblast, Diamond Storm, Earth Power, and Stealth Rock. This was heavily influenced by the Florges. After Stealth Rock, I should be able to 2-hit KO physically defensive Florges with Diamond Storm. That was just kind of the main reason for switching my investment over there. Earth Power is still doing a decent chunk to Heatran. Moonblast is still an OHKO on the Mega Lopunny. So it's just, I think in general, it's just kind of the way to go here, just to help deal with the Florges, help deal with the Shaman to some extent. I'd expect he'd run like more especially defensive than physically defensive, but I don't know necessarily what he's thinking as far as the Shaman set's concerned. I wasn't even necessarily expecting to see Shaman in the first place, since I was expecting the Florges. So yeah, Diamond Storm is just nice in general to get defense boost versus team. Otherwise, Megalopunny and Aerodactyl start to threaten me a little bit harder. If I am +2, I think I can live a Choice Band Earthquake from the Aerodactyl at +2. Potentially. I can't remember off the top of my head that calc, but yeah, physically offensive Diancie here. Just spamming Diamond Storm at his team is generally pretty good, with the exception, of course, being the Swampert. Next up here, we've got Nixon the Crocodile, running Choice Scarf Crocodile with Knockoff, Crunch, Pursuit, and Earthquake, and Intimidate, of course, as well. Running Max Attack Adamant Nature. I can't remember exactly what the speed creep was for. I think it was speed creeping him, speed creeping me on something. Was kind of the idea behind the Crocodile. Hit 254. Let's see what's that times 1.5. 1.5. It's 381. So I think I was speed creeping him, speed creeping, God knows, some kind of +1 version of Dragonite. I can't honestly remember. I might have just messed up this investment straight up. We'll see how that plays out in the match as well. But running the Triple Dark on Crocodile I think is really good in this game. Pursuit obviously threatens the Lottie from switching out in the first place. If he's running Cobra Berry, Knockoff does more damage. If he's running Z-Move, Crunch does more damage. Knockoff should OHKO non-Cobra, non-Z variants of Latios, although I don't think he'd run... I feel like that's one of the 2 items he would run versus me. I don't think he would really be running anything else. And then Crunch should OHKO Z-Move variants of Latios. So this is just kind of an always check to the Latios, unless he's running Choice Scarf, of course. But if he's running Choice Scarf versus me, which I don't think is the greatest set in the first place here anyways, because I have the Psychic Immunity, I have the dual resistance in Scizor. I think he'll be carrying HP Fire for that anyways. So I feel like Choice Scarf Crocodile has the potential to Pursuit Trap the Latios or just remove it from play entirely. If he's running like a Calm Mind set, I can at least Revenge Kill it with Crocodile later in the game. Next up here is Dedicated Sackmaw on the Scizor, kind of a must-bring this week to help deal with a lot of his team. Running Akaberry Scizor with Technician, U-Turn, Bullet Punch, Sword Stance, and Roost. Running a bulkier variant of Scizor, kind of mixed defensive physically and specially. He's meant to take hits from a lot of stuff on his team, things like the Lopunny. I don't really anticipate him to be carrying Fire Punch, but I do have the Akaberry anyways. It also takes hits decently from the Latios. I can take Draco Meteor into -2 HP Fire pretty easily with the Akaberry intact, so... that's kind of the idea from the Scizor here. Just U-turn around his team, Roost up over the course of the game. Obviously, he's got the Heatran, so that's going to be probably his primary switch into my Scizor anyways. If I can just keep myself healthy and U-turn out when that thing's coming in, I can get into my appropriate responses. I do have decent Heatran switch-ins off a slow U-turn kind of thing from my Scizor, so it's not the worst thing in the world. To have the Heatran there, I can actually pressure it pretty heavily with things like my Toxicroak, Crocodile, even my Diancie with Earth Power should be pressuring that thing over the course of the match. And I could potentially get a late game Bullet Punch sweep going if the Heatran is gone. I should be able to SD up on a lot of stuff on his team because I should be able to take most hits from everything that he'd go for with my Akaberry intact. Things like coverage HP Fire from Shaman, coverage HP Fire from Latios, I should be able to live pretty easily. Go for the Sword Stance, and just hopefully if his team's chipped down enough at that point in the match, get a clean with Bullet Punch. Next up here is Sarcophagus to the Cofagrigus. Felt like this was a must-bring as well. Running Rocky Helmet, Max Fizdef Cofagrigus with Will-O-Wisp, Knockoff, Nightshade, and Pain Split. This is my main Mega Lopunny response on the team, because normally you can just say, oh, I'll run Dual Stab Mega Lopunny, it hits everything. But in this case, obviously his ability will convert from Scrappy to Mummy when he hits me, which means he'll no longer be able to touch me with his normal and fighting type moves. Even if he's carrying like Ice Punch for my D-Knight or something, that's not going to do a whole lot to Cofagrigus. So with the Rocky Helmet, should be able to get some chip off on that thing, potentially put it in range of a Bullet Punch late game for my Scizor, or at least get it into range of like a Choice Scarf Earthquake for my Crocodile. Will-O-Wisp is just nice to spread around his team. Obviously, it threatens out the Mega Lopunny itself, but it can also be quite useful for some of his other physically offensive mons. Even getting a burn on Swampert really wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because getting a burn on that thing means my Toxicroak can actually take hits from it a little bit better. Getting a burn, of course, on the Aerodactyl is nice as well. I mentioned that thing was a huge threat as well. Honchkrow and Gliscopod as well. Even though I'm not necessarily expecting them to come, getting a burn off on those things would be really nice from my Cofagrigus. Next up here, and last up here, is Kermit the Toxicroak, running Life Orb Toxicroak with Bulk Up, Drain Punch, Gunk Shot, and Sucker Punch. At +1 with my attack investment, I do OHKO regular Latios. I don't think he'd be running any HP because he'd want to be speed tying potentially with my Mega Diancie. So I think he's going to run like max special attack, max speed timid, which means he should be able to drop from a +1 sucker punch from this Toxicroak. I've got 208 in attack, 104 in HP, and then the rest dumped into speed. Can't remember exactly what I was speed creeping in this instance. It was probably the Heat Ran. Yeah, it looks like it's enough for Heat Ran, so this is a really good offensive check to his Heat Ran. I could potentially bulk up on him because he shouldn't really want to risk that thing early game, especially because I do have the Scizor in the back, and that's kind of his best response to it on the team. So I felt like Toxicroak could just come in early game, potentially get a bulk up off, and start to threaten his team that way. I should live non-choice band variants of Aerodactyl if I'm at full after a +1, and then be able to fire off a nice Drain Punch, get a lot of health back, and potentially Sucker Punch to pick him off if he doesn't die to the +1 Drain Punch. So it's also a good Scald switch in to the Swampert. Obviously, he's probably also carrying Earthquake, but Bulk Up should at least help me start to lift some of those. If I get a burn off on it with my Cofagrigus, that could be pretty nice for me in the long run as far as bulking up in that thing's face. Just firing off some strong Drain Punches at his team. Gunk Shot was there primarily to hit the Florges, but it also hits the Shaman as well. It's a pretty good thing to spam versus team because his Steel type is the Heat Ram, which obviously isn't going to appreciate fighting type moves. So in general, Toxicroak is actually pretty valuable in this matchup, I think. And could definitely put in some work if it catches him off guard here. If I like bulk up as he decides to like protect with his Heat Ran or something, trying to scout out my set, or even just bulk up on the switch hard into like Swampert, for example. I can start bulking up in that thing's face because I am going to be getting defense boosts out of it. So I think in the long run, Toxicroak could definitely put in some work this game. Drain Punch can keep me healthy, and I could potentially pick off a Mon or two. So that's kind of the hope going into the game is maybe early game break a little bit with Toxicroak, and then late game try and set up for a Swords Dance sweep with my Mega Scizor, or with my regular Scizor, or a potential Choice Scarf sweep with my Crocodile. So yeah, let's get into the match here. As you can see on your screen, he did elect to bring the Mega Lopunny, Latios, Aerodactyl, Swampert, Heat Ran, and Shaman, so pretty close to what I was expecting, bar the Shaman. I was thinking maybe, like I mentioned in my team builder, that he'd bring the Florges. And the Swampert could have been swapped out for something like the, what else? The Raikou. Like I mentioned in prep, Raikou could potentially, like a sub-variant of Raikou, could potentially be problematic for me. But in general, this is certainly not a very unreasonable team for him to bring. I was pretty sure like the three on the left were must-brings, and Heat Ran as well to help deal with the Scizor. So it was really the last two Mons I was kind of not so sure on what he might end up bringing. Florges, Raikou, Shaman, and Swampert all made some good sense. Seeing the Swampert, I'm starting to kick myself a little bit for swapping the HP Grass over to Toxic on my Rotom Heat. But Toxic is still decent here. It hits everything but the Heat Ran on his team. Obviously, the Shaman does have access to Natural Cure, but it's not like you necessarily want to be switching a Shaman in on my Rotom Heat anyway. So, looking at lead matchup here, I've got a couple options. My Rotom Heat's not bad as a lead option here, just to kind of counter lead his Heat Ran if he likes to run that. Or even if he leads with the Swampert, I can potentially Toxic that thing. I am a little bit worried about a potential Aerodactyl lead though as well. So like I mentioned, I have a couple options here, but I think in general, kind of the best thing for me to do is go out into my, excuse me, out into my Rotom Heat to start off with. He should definitely fake out here with his Lopunny, like just to get the Mega off, get some damage off to start the game, because he doesn't know what my Rotom Heat set is, and if I'm carrying Will-O-Wisp, he obviously doesn't want to take that. So I'm just going to go out into my Cofagrigus, knowing that he should go for a fake out here, and just get off a little bit of chip damage from that Rocky Helmet. You can see that does more to him than it does to me, and obviously he loses his Scrappy ability. So Cofagrigus is in a pretty decent position here to start the game. He should definitely fear a Will-O-Wisp here, which means I'm just going to click Knock Off on this incoming Heat Ran. Heat Ran seemed like the most obvious switch in to me, so Knock Off on pretty much anything that this Heat Ran had, whether it was Shuka or Air Balloon, was going to be really nice. Popping the Air Balloon is great for my Diancie, so I can whack him with an Earth Power later in the game. And here I'm just going to swap right back out into my Rotom Heat, predicting him to just go for Stealth Rocks or potentially a Toxic here. Rotom Heat is less valuable to me than my Cofagrigus, so I felt like having it Toxic was really not the worst thing in the world, and I can just go straight for a Volt Switch here. I should probably be slower than this Heat Ran, assuming he's running like any speed. So I am, as it turns out, slower than this Heat Ran. He goes for Will-O-Wisp, and I'm slower, so I get the slow Volt Switch off, which is great for me. This Heat Ran is guaranteed in range of Earth Power from my Mega Diancie, so I'm just going to go right out into that. And knowing that he should scout for Earth Power, he's got 3 great switch-ins to Earth Power in the back. Knowing that he should scout for it and definitely not throw away his Heat Ran this early in the game with my Scizor still fully healthy, I'm just going to go right for the Stealth Rock here and start to pressure his team that way. Prevent him from switching in, Ran for free on me over the course of the match. With Stealth Rock up, that Heat Ran's going to get chipped down over the course of the match, coming in on Scizor, and potentially set up for late game Bullet Punch sweep. So here, fearing him to be like Choice Scarf Shaman or anything like that, I'm just going to swap right back out into my Rotom Heat. Like I mentioned, it's not super valuable to me, so I don't mind it taking damage early in the match here. This is essentially what it's here for anyways. Would have been this in the Florges, so go out into Rotom Heat here as he just goes for Leech Seed. I'm a little worried that he's a Sub-Seed variant of Shaman, so I'm just going to Volt Switch here, get on out of there. I don't want to be clicking Overheat and dropping my special attack stat. I also don't want to be giving a Flash Fire boost to that Heat Ran, but he smartly decides to swap into Swampert this time, presumably just to get up his Stealth Rocks. I probably should have doubled out there, predicting either the Swampert or the Heat Ran to come in, but unfortunately I did go for Volt Switch there. Take another good chunk off on my Rotom Heat here as I go for the Toxic. I really needed to land a Toxic on that Swampert there, just because it's such a huge threat to my team. Unfortunately, he did double back out into the Shaman to catch that Toxic. I don't think that's necessarily what he was scouting for. He was scouting probably for HP Grass, if I had to guess. But unfortunately, I am going to take a bunch more chip damage here. It does put me into my barrier range at the very least, and now I've got a little bit of a 50-50 going on. I don't think he'd want to stay in with his Shaman here, considering it's Toxic, so I'm just going to double straight out of here because I don't want to catch another Volt Switch into that Swampert. So I'm going to swap out into my Scizor here. It was kind of like my best middle ground type play, because obviously the Shaman's not going to threaten me too much with whatever it wants to go for, and then the Swampert coming in I felt like was fairly obvious. So I don't have great switch-ins to Swampert, like I mentioned, but I did want to get my Rotom Heat out of there, reset my Toxic, get off the Leech Seed, and then just U-turn out there. So U-turn out, get a little bit of chip damage off on this Swampert, try to scout out whether it's physically defensive, specially defensive, whether it's carrying Rindo Berry. Goes for Scald right away. I don't have good Scald switch-ins on my team because I do have Toxic Croak, which is weak to ground. So Swampert's just kind of, like I mentioned, a huge threat here, and I'm just going to go right for the Toxic. Like, I need to start whittling this thing down if I'm going to do anything in this game. So he's going to go for Stealth Rock here. That's fine. I'm just going to defog with my Rotom Heat here. I realize it's not really realistic for me to play with Rocks up this game. They hurt me more than they hurt him in general. So getting the defog off here will be nice enough, just to keep my team a little bit healthier. I don't mind defogging away my own Rocks a ton because it's not like Rocks are super good versus his team besides the Aerodactyl. So I'm just going to let my Rotom go down here. Like I mentioned, its usefulness was really kind of limited in this match. At the very least, it got the Toxic off on the Swampert, so that's good. But now, again, I don't have great ways to revenge kill this Swampert. Mega Diancie is not going to kill it from this range at all. I could go Cofagrigus, but I don't want him potentially Toxicking me or just getting his Stealth Rocks back up. So I figure my best case scenario here is to go out into Toxicroak and just start to bulk up and use it to break through this Swampert. Like I mentioned, this thing's a huge threat to my team, and I just need to get it out of the way. So he's going to go right for the Earthquake as I go for bulk up. Still going to do a good chunk of damage to me, but at least not going to OHKO me with my defense boost. And I'm just going to go for a Drain Punch here. If this is going to be a double down, that's fine with me. I just don't want him to get Rocks back up, because now that I've seen him on the Swampert, I don't think he'd be carrying them on the Heat Ran as well. So I'm going to go for Drain Punch, do a good chunk of damage to the Swampert, and again, basically just trade Toxicroak for the Swampert here. So not going too well for me to start off the game. Down 6-4 here, about to be 5-4 with the Swampert being so low, but I'm going to go out into Diancie here and just click Moonblast. There's no reason for me to risk anything here. If he goes for Earthquake, I'm in a lot of trouble, so there's no reason for me to risk anything and sack my Diancie just to get Rocks back up. So I'm going to go for Moonblast. He doesn't have good switch-ins because the Heat Ran will be 2-hit KO'd by Moonblast into Earth Power, so just clicking Moonblast there is pretty nice for me. And now we're getting this a little bit closer. It's 5-4. Still definitely in the back here. The Shaman's actually going to be kind of difficult for my team to deal with, and this Aerodactyl is also a huge problem. So obviously I have to watch out for an Iron Head or an Earthquake here. I'm going to go out into my Scizor to scout for that and see what he wants to do, see what kind of investment he's got on the Aerodactyl. So he goes for the Earthquake. He does a solid chunk of damage to me. It turns out he has Life Orb Aerodactyl. Obviously, he needs to fear me going for a Bullet Punch here because he doesn't know my investment or anything like that. Or he might know my investment if he calced it off the Swampert. But Heat Ran's pretty much the obvious switch in here anyway, so I'm going to double out into my Crocodile. This did one of two things. It either scouted for Fire Fang coming out of the Aerodactyl, or it caught his Heat Ran on the switch in. So here I'm just going to go straight for Knockoff. Again, I don't think he should be risking Heat Ran this early in the game. Or actually, I went for Crunch this time. My bad. I went for Crunch here. Don't think he should be risking Heat Ran this early in the game with my Scizor still pretty healthy. He needs that thing later in the match, so felt like Crunch was a pretty safe play there, and Knockoff obviously wouldn't have done as much damage to the Heat Ran now that its item is gone. So Shaman comes out here. I'm expecting him to go for either an HP Fire or a Leech Seed here, trying to catch my Scizor on the switch, but unfortunately he just goes right for the Seed Flare, and I throw away my Diancie for no reason. So that was really unfortunate, really bad play by me. I should have just gone out into Scizor and then scattered for HP Fire afterwards, but what can you do? So now I'm going to go for Scizor here. This is a free U-turn. I do have the Aqua Berry, so HP Fire is not going to knock me out. Again, the Heatran comes in, starting to whittle that thing down a little bit. Obviously, these U-turns are not doing very much damage at all, but eventually this Heatran is going to start to be in range of some of my other mons on my team. It's going to be very difficult to bring this back, though, at this point in the match. I'm going to have to play really well with my Crocodile, so here the Crocodile comes out. Again, he really should not risk his Heatran here. He should just go back out into Shaman, like he has no reason not to, really. Even if I knock him off, as I do here, he's still going to be a pretty good check to this Crocodile. I obviously won't 2-hit KO him with that damage, so he's got a pretty free either Synthesis or Leech Seed or Seed Flare here, so I got to go back out into my Scizor. Obviously, I don't think he's going to go for HP Fire this turn, as he does reveal the Synthesis. So again, it's another free U-turn for my Scizor, but he's got that Heatran that can come in all day. But here he makes a good play and goes into the Aerodactyl instead. Predicting me to go for U-turn there as I do. So he gets the Aerodactyl in, and I really don't have great ways to deal with the Aerodactyl, if I'm being honest. My best way is probably to go out into Crocodile here, get the Intimidate off, and just go straight for a knockoff. Knockoff should guarantee KO the Aerodactyl from this range, or 2-hit KO the Shaman. Unfortunately, I am slower than this Aerodactyl, so I totally screwed up the EVs on this Crocodile. I don't know what I was thinking he would do with his investment. Maybe I think I probably thought he would run like Adamant on his Aerodactyl and his Lopunny, so maybe I just crept that. But that was a huge mistake, it turns out. So I take a bunch of damage for no reason as I went for the crunch there onto the Aerodactyl. Now the Lopunny comes back out, which I'm pretty sure I also will not be faster than at this point. I think he mentioned he crept +1 Adamant Dragonite, so he ran Jolly on his two fast mons there. But big mistake there with the Crocodile having it be so slow. So get out into my Cofagrigus, no big deal on this Lopunny. Gonna go right for the Pain Split here, because I'm not sure exactly what he wants to do. And again, I don't want to give this Heatran a Flash Fire boost upon switch in. I don't mind sacking off Cofagrigus at this point in the match, because that Lopunny is potentially in range of a +2 Bullet Punch from my Scizor. So what I like to do here is just go for Nightshade and start to whittle down this Heatran, try and set up for that Scizor sweep. Fortunately for me, he does miss that Toxic, which is going to give me a little bit of a chance to crawl back into this one, and he goes for Will-O-Wisp on the following turn, trying to catch me going into my Scizor, I think, or potentially my Crocodile on the Toxic. So get the Nightshade off, KO the Heatran. Sarcophagus is doing okay here. I should be able to get off 1 or 2 more hits before I go down. At this point, I'm not doing a ton to help with the Lopunny anyways, besides getting 1 more Rocky Helmet Turner chip off on it, so I'm pretty content to just sack off my Cofagrigus at this point. Scout out what this Latios is going to do, because it's either Z-move or it's Cobra Berry, right? So knockoff is either A, going to tell me that he's Z-move, or B, it's going to pop that Cobra Berry for my Crocodile on the back. So knockoff is my play here. Oh no, I went for Pain Split first. Pain Split's fine, I guess. He shouldn't be able to KO me from this range with a +1 hit anyways, unless he's Z-move, which, again, would let me know that I can go into my Crocodile to revenge kill him. So I'm just going to go for the knockoff on this turn. So he goes for a second Calm Mind, so a little bit of Calm Mind games going on here, because I'm not sure if I can get in my Crocodile safely. Like, Draco's still pretty free for him right here, because he's still at a pretty decent amount of HP. And knockoff, as you can see, did not knock off any items. So he is Z-move. So if he just drops like a Z-Draco here, I have no good switch-ins. So I have to stay in here with Sarcophagus and just spam Nightshade at him, unfortunately. Like, I could have gotten in Crocodile on the Roosh there, right, and been in a really good spot if I just click Crunch. But unfortunately, like I mentioned, I couldn't risk him just going for a +2 Z move right there. It would have knocked out Crocodile, it would have knocked out Scizor, so I'm just going to have to let the Sarcophagus go down here and try to revenge kill this thing with my Crocodile. So Latios knocks out the Cofagrigus here. There's still potential for me to bring this back with the Scizor. If I can crunch this and then crunch the Lopunny and then SD in the Lopunny's face, I should be able to clean with +2 Bullet Punch, because I believe the Shaman's still not super healthy. Well, it's at 86%, but the Shaman shouldn't be able to KO me through my Aqua Berry, and if he's not carrying fire coverage on the Lopunny, like, there's still potential for mind games here. So I'm just going to go for Crunch, try and get some chip damage off on this Lopunny, but unfortunately, like I mentioned, I did screw up my investment on this Crocodile, which is costing me dearly here, because now he's guaranteed out of range of a +2 Bullet Punch, and I basically just have to hope that he switches out at some point during this exchange. So I'm going to go for SD here, as he's just going to go for a high jump kick, and fortunately does not knock me out. With my Aqua Berry intact, I am assuming right here, hold on, let me pause it for a second. So I'm at +2 now. Like I mentioned, +2 Bullet Punch won't knock out this Lopunny, because I screwed up the investment on my Crocodile there. Had I gotten the crunch damage off, he would have been in range of a +2 bullet punch. Big mistake on my part. That's something that I normally do not make those kinds of mistakes in team building, but I really screwed it up there for whatever reason. I don't know why I ran so much HP investment on my Crocodile, but that really cost me here. So now I have kind of a 50-50. Like, I would have had a lot more of a 50-50 here if this low punny was a little bit more chipped down, especially if I had gotten like a defense drop with my crunch, which is always possible. I could have potentially forced out the low punny as it went for SD, but here I kind of have to go off his choke. Like, I could go for the crit bullet punch on the low punny, but I'm not going to KO the Shaman with a bullet punch anyways, even though I crit it. So what I have to do here is go off his choke and hope he switches out into Shaman, thinking he can just revenge kill me with fake out. Yeah, so that's my play here. I'm just going to go for a roost here as he goes out, as I'm hoping for him to go out in Shaman, but he does make the right play here and just stays in to return me and pick up the 2-0 victory. So, very good game to Cena. Definitely not my best prep, I'll say, with the Crocodile being underspeeding the Aerodactyl, underspeeding the low punny. That was a huge misplay, a huge misprep on my end. And I ended up having to kind of go off a choke there, which he did, unfortunately for me, did not end up making. But very good game to Cena. He played really well, brought a good team. I didn't bring enough for Swampert, looking back at it for sure. And again, the Crocodile set, I really screwed that up. So hopefully we can turn in a better performance our next game out in the OLT, and hopefully pick up our first win in the league. Thank you guys very much for watching to this point if you did, and I hope to see you guys all in another video. Later.